think we'll make a start. So I'm Michelle Carter. I'm Head of Transport at the Knowledge Transfer Network, and I very warmly welcome you to the competition briefing event for Future Flight. It's very exciting that we're all here finally for this briefing. Welcome also to those watching online. We are live. This is being recorded so that you can watch it again at a later date. So welcome to you all online. Please feel free to ask any questions through the chat function if you are watching online, and Charlie's there to help you answer those questions for you. So before we start, I've just got some housekeeping. There is no fire alarms expected today, so if they do go off, we just need to go through the glass doors that you all came through to come to reception, and we congregate in the car park. The toilets are through the waterside where the refreshments are, and lunch will be served in the waterside as well. And if you could please put your phones on silent or turn them off, that would be much appreciated as well. Thank you. You will have seen the networking wall that we have outside. That's an opportunity for organisations to put their expertise on there, so feel free to go and look at those cards during the lunch break. And if you would like to complete one, Natasha and Jess will probably have some spare cards on the desk as well. We will collate them as we go through this Future Flight journey and make them available for you. So be on the lookout for emails that can signpost you to those cards. So this morning we have 3 presentations from Innovate UK explaining the background to the competition, the scope of the competition and the application process. So I'm very, very pleased to welcome onto the stage, we've got Gary Cutts, who's the Challenge Director for Future Flight. Then we've got Alfred Young, who's the Technical Lead at Innovate UK. And we've got John Morlidge, who's Head of Aerospace at Innovate UK. And Isobel Finley-Day, who's the Portfolio Manager at Innovate UK. After the 3 presentations, we will then have the Q&A session. So if you can hang on to your questions until that would be much appreciated. So to get things cracking, I'll just introduce Gary Cutts to the stage.
Thank you, Michelle, and I will just add my warm welcome and introduction to you all to this Future Flight competition briefing, and again to those in the room in Birmingham, and we think a significant number of people online and via phone as well. It's actually very pleasing, I will say at the outset, to see the volume of people, the breadth of companies that have chosen to engage. That gives us some confidence that we're about to do some great and really interesting things. So, as Michelle said, you will hear from a number of people. First, you will hear from me. I am Gary Cutts, the Challenge Director for Future Flight. I'll be then followed by John Morlidge. John is Head of Aerospace for Innovate UK, but also the Deputy Challenge Director for the Future Flight Challenge. John will describe the competition approach, which will incorporate elements of an Innovate UK Grand Challenge and collaborative research and development, and those principles of collaborative research will come throughout all of our conversations. And finally, you'll hear from the competitions team in the guise of Izzy, supported by Alfred, who will outline what we might call the mechanics, the important rules of engagement of the challenge to let you know how to engage with it. Then we'll take the Q&A at the end. So the Future Flight strategy is one of the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund programmes. It's valued at £125 million of UK government funding to demonstrate novel aviation systems around 3 vehicle types. I'll spend a short amount of time describing the complexity of the challenge, how it fits together and why it is like it is for you, and how is that primarily is being considered around 6 problem statements to frame the nature of the challenge and the context of the 3 vehicle types we're presuming are in the programme. So the past 100 years have taken us, it may feel like a long time, but it's taken us an awful long way in aviation and aerospace. It's taken us from the Wright brothers via the jet engine age to create an aviation system that today is flying, and numbers change all the time, but something of the order of 22,000 large transport aircraft safely around the globe. Interestingly, as we put those facts together, we could have added more vehicle types as well, because there are a number of other classes of vehicle types as well. But it's a phenomenal achievement that the aviation industry has moved to. That's given us what we'd say is a known and understood system around aviation that's developed to be extremely safe, very productive, and is recognised by everyone. However, the advent and convergence of new technologies in things ranging from materials, artificial intelligence, autonomy, and more is enabling the design of new types of aircraft, and we expect them to bring new classes of airborne services. And as design, testing, and potential manufacture continues globally at pace, an aviation system capable of accepting these new types of flying machines into operation is required. It is not enough that we design increasingly novel and interesting air vehicles. They have to come into being in a safe manner. And as that new aviation system is discussed here in the UK and elsewhere in the world, what always follows is a myriad of questions. And these are obviously just examples. We couldn't begin to be exhaustive. But where are sensible places to develop and demonstrate flight for these new classes of vehicles? Do we seek to model the current aviation system and then model the insertion of new aircraft into that system? Or do we seek to redesign an entirely new aviation system for these new classes of vehicle, do that end to end, and then execute some kind of global aviation transformation program where we move to a completely different premise? How will systems book in and out goods and people for things like flying taxis? Where do I get a ticket for a flying taxi? Is it like a train? Do we do that via apps? Do we do it via phones? What's the premise of the service we provide? How do we mirror the security checks that an airport has today on the rooftop of an urban building? How much security should we have in that sense? What security measures are required to enable on-demand agile transportation? And as an aside, if you do a long-haul transport and you look at the time taken in security versus the time flying, it's a substantial component. How will that translate to new classes of vehicle? What can be learned from current systems of transport that are not aviation, particularly those that are driving electrification or autonomy as well? How do people get on and off those types of transport? Can we read some of that across? What's the right infrastructure for charging, or what's the right infrastructure for alternative fuels, if that's the direction we go down? Is it right to drive electrification as the central theme, or should we focus also on alternative fuels for conventional aircraft operating today and for the backlog of thousands of aircraft that are already out there? What's the right balance there? And one we love, what is the overall set of economics for a new set of aviation systems? Who makes the money? How affordable is it? And are we guaranteed that someone will make the money? Is this an investable proposition? We strongly believe that it is. And the questions in this field keep on coming. How will remotely piloted vehicles operate around corners and out of sight? Something many people in the room will be considering. How near are we to fully autonomous flight? And how readily will this be accepted by the public? What's the readiness like for such radical new aviation systems? Do we just let that be passive, or do we intend to drive public opinion in these areas? Will there be more what we might call Gatwick moments of drones coming near to current classes of flight? How much of a consideration is that? How will we maintain the security of passengers throughout? How will on-demand air services be integrated with scheduled flight, which seems like an inherently good thing to do, but they're fundamentally different classes. And the more questions that are asked, the more questions emerge. I've been here 5 months, and that is undoubtedly true. The more we delve into this and talk to people, the more you realise there's a breadth of problems to be solved, which makes it fascinating. Questions, of course, are a good thing for us, because whilst novel aircraft are hugely exciting and indeed offer significant potential in addressing climate change, improving connectivity and reducing congestion, they can only become a reality if we prove that they are safe enough and viable enough, both economically and societally as well. So those questions are important to us. In an attempt to focus these questions, we devised via consultation with some stakeholders a suite of problem statements that we hope the future flight will address, either completely or in part. I'm going to read through these problem statements so that clarity of our thinking is there, and I know these are quite small on the slide. You obviously have all the information. So problem statement number 1, Drone technologies are increasingly well developed, and there are many organisations developing individual vehicle technologies for urban air mobility. However, the full range of applications is stifled by the lack of infrastructure capabilities, and we would say that's both physical and digital infrastructure needed to exploit the global market potential. The vehicles themselves will not be enough. So how could infrastructure be adapted? How do you pull in urban planners? How do you enable things like a living lab experiment to consider insertion of drone capabilities into the places we live? Problem statement number 2. The current air traffic management systems are not scalable and will not cope with potential step change in the volume of traffic, growing density, and the increasing diversity of airspace users, and the need for fully integrated, non-segregated airspace. And interestingly, some of the conversations we've had with people managing today's airspace, how much at capacity that is, and that is a demand in its own right just to fix airspace capacity for current aircraft, let alone the volumes of new classes that we're now considering driving with your help. So how do we take over 100 years of knowledge and expertise and expand it to take on board these new vehicle types? Problem statement number 3. There are no clear technology, regulatory or operational paths from piloted to remotely piloted to remotely piloted with visual line of sight to remotely piloted beyond visual line of sight to fully autonomous air vehicle operation. I think that is a journey that we've set upon, but what is the path that gets you there? Again, maintaining integrity and safety. So there is a clear need to establish an aviation system which maintains that high level of safety, but allows such technology development and insertion. And what's happening on the ground in things like autonomous and connected vehicles, what can we learn from that, where it's a different class of safety, but safety and public perception is nonetheless important? Can we learn from that, translate some of that thinking into air vehicles? So interesting technical questions on that kind of control of safety. So how do you know that the vehicle in the air is communicating, it's received its messages and is acting in a safe and intended manner of operation? So the whole safety premise is clearly very important. Problem statement number 4. Environmental pressure to move towards more electric flight is high, but the technology is some way off, even for regional aircraft. And I think there are very different views about how far the technology is off, but no one thinks that that's imminent for us. We think that there is a clear need to create pathways from urban vehicles to sub-regional class to larger aircraft based on market-driven technology, so that we use the classes of vehicle that are very central in future flight as learning and accelerating platforms to try to pull electrification into large-scale flight. There are a range of public and media perceptions of more widespread and possibly autonomous air vehicles. We think there's a need to develop use cases and operational frameworks that cultivate public engagement and create market demand. And how we do this is really important. We could start from a premise that the public is negative and anti and position ourselves there, or we could say, no, the public is potentially very positive about this, they just need to have the right level of communication, opportunities described to them. But either way, we have to address that problem that this is quite a new market, it is a new set of technologies, and for some of the public, this will be quite a challenging step change. And lastly, although this is a developing field, we still believe that globally there's not a complete aviation innovation and development environment that allows the real-life demonstration and evaluation of all the above elements. There are certainly parts of that in various places around the world, but there doesn't seem to be a total kind of experimental development environment that pulls these technologies into real life. So these problem statements and other similar problem statements are central to what we do. One of the things that's very important is we recognise these 6 problem statements will not be exhaustive. They are the result of some smart people thinking and talking and socialising, but you will be able to come up with more problem statements beyond that with the range of stakeholders. So our important position is that we wish you to try and solve these types of problem statements, but that we also accept that there are other problems that are relevant, and we will consider those in the programme. So it's a well-cited and well-used phrase that 2 brains are better than 1. And to this end, it's recognised that bringing together of aviation stakeholders with aerospace stakeholders, along critically with organisations outside both of those sectors, will bring better solutions to some of the problems identified. It's therefore anticipated, if not expected, that consortia will form, and those consortia will be diverse, not just in terms of capabilities, but also in terms of their heritage, by which we mean we expect to see airport providers, airlines, aircraft providers, people involved in airspace, city planning, transportation modellers, industry, academia, digital technologies, IT and communications. It's probably very obvious we could have gone on for some time adding people who could have a part to play in this, and we expect them to work together to challenge themselves. As presented already, the challenge is both complicated and broad, and the challenge team have determined to create some context against which the problem statement should be considered. The first area of focus is the vehicle. Problem statements should be considered in the context of one or more of three classes of vehicles. For the avoidance of doubt, applications considering solely the design, manufacture of a whole or part of an aircraft in complete isolation will not be considered suitable for the Future Flight programme. It's an integrated aviation system that we expect vehicles to take a part in, but it's not a vehicle programme. The naming of vehicle classes, and the ones we've used, have been drones, urban air mobility, and all-electric sub-regional, is purely to aid how those problem statements might be addressed, and by which I mean if it becomes obvious as you form consortia that a slightly different class or a class with a different name is the right vehicle to bring these technologies to market and accelerate them, that is acceptable. We're not prescribing that it has to be drone, urban air mobility or sub-regional aircraft. We just expect that that's a good way to frame the challenge. And lastly, I wanted to share what we mean by an aviation system. This chart's been shown many times. It's developed a little. There are certainly people in the room will have seen this double-digit times from us, but it's important to walk through that. We see an aviation system as comprised of technologies on an aircraft that interact with airspace management systems. We see it including the ground infrastructure, the customers and the use cases. It's governed by a range of controls and regulations and operates via established operating models. Again, this picture of the aviation system is not intended to be exhaustive. It's not possible to produce an exhaustive picture on one slide of PowerPoint. There are many aspects to it. But it seeks to steer innovators to consider aspects that cut across the wider aviation system rather than operating solely in one of the vertical aspects that we show on this chart. It's anticipated that programmes will come forward that consider several elements of an aviation system. We're very clear not to put in overarching rules. We want flexibility in the programme, but our expectation is that people will want to work across those elements, finding synergy and ways to drive the technology faster by doing so. So in summary, Future Flight is a £125 million Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund investment on a novel aviation system to enable the safe operation of novel aircraft such as drones, urban air mobility or all-electric sub-regional aircraft. Future Flight will bring a broad range of stakeholders. I've stressed that many times. It is a very important aspect of the programme. It will bring them together both within and outside the current aerospace and aviation sectors. So thank you. John Morlidge will now provide some insight into the challenge and seek to provide further engagement with you and how we intend to do the collaboration and run the programme. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. So we'll give a little bit of an overview of the actual challenge programme, and it's a phased programme of open competitions. And I'm going to take you through a little bit of a step-by-step of actually what do we mean by this discovery workshop, what is the programme, how are we addressing the different challenge statements that you saw that Gary presented, and what is this phase one, what is the workshop, what is it that we have to do to get involved, and give you some criteria around that one, and then finish up with some key dates for this competition. So as I said, Future Flight will run as a series of open competitions, and as you've seen, we've devised these via consultation and a suite of problem statements that we hope will be discussed and used through the Future Flight Challenge programme, that these will be addressed. So to this end, we've constructed a phased programme of an open, transparent and inclusive set of competitions that will seek to encourage engagement and collaboration from a broad range of stakeholders. To this end, we envisage 3 distinct phases of competition, namely discovery, development and demonstration. In phase 1, we will look into the selection of individuals or consortia to attend a discovery workshop at which the participants will explore the challenges and form potential collaborations to develop their projects in further detail. In phase 2, which we see as approximately a 12-month period, we'd expect consortia to develop their projects in more detail, leading into a third phase, which is approximately over a 2-year period, where we'd expect consortia to demonstrate real-life representative examples to address the problem statements and to be delivering these in collaboration with businesses, including regulation, air traffic management, example customers and infrastructure and societal engagement in terms of looking at those demonstrations of real-life examples. Just to reiterate, by open, transparent, and inclusive, we mean that all 3 phases of the competition as a programme will be open to applicants from all eligible applicants themselves. By transparent, we mean we will publish the eligibility criteria and scope for each of the separate competitions. And by inclusive, we mean you don't have to be involved in a previous phase of activity to make an application to subsequent phases of the challenge programme itself. So in terms of the discovery phase, what is it? So we're asking individuals and organisations who believe they can play a role in addressing the future flight problem statements to compete to participate in a 2-day immersive workshop. It is an intensive setting workshop and you will be challenged. And you'll be expected to explore and hopefully develop there potentially new approaches with individuals and organisations that you may not have worked with previously. The Discovery Workshop is suited particularly to individuals and organisations who can step outside their own area of expertise, who often are driven and enjoy creative thinking. But I can guarantee you it is an intensive workshop, so be prepared to think innovatively and work with others at the workshop. In terms of the Future Flight Challenge statements, your proposal submission must respond to one or more of the problem statements suggested by the Future Flight Challenge, as Gary previously described them. Your submission must briefly describe your plans and ideas in relation to how they would evolve and scale within all 3 phases of the competition going forward. So namely, as you would move from a discovery workshop into a project development phase and then ultimately as a system demonstration. So what are we looking at for people who attend the workshop? Well, in terms of participants at the workshop, you've got to be very willing to engage in collaborative activities. You really need to have an open, engaging and flexible, imaginative and creative outlook to the challenge itself. We are looking for a broad range of disciplines and backgrounds. We want to be able to introduce people who may not normally work together to each other and ensure there's a wide range of expertise to cover the scope of the challenge. We want to be able to develop new and highly innovative ideas. We want people to be able to work constructively from a broad range of diverse disciplines. And we will also be considering as part of this process equality, inclusion, and the diversity of participants that take part. We also really do need to, by the statement itself, to make sure you're freely available to attend the workshop on the 4th or 5th of February. The venue will be in Birmingham, and we'll announce the actual venue and timings shortly. As I said, the Discovery Workshop is a 2-day event. It is immersive setting, and you will be challenged. So please bear this in mind when you are putting your application in, and make sure that comes across in your application. In terms of the criteria, specifically for the Discovery Workshop, your organisation must be a UK registered business. You can be any size, or you must be a research and technology organisation. In phase 1, any eligible organisation can lead up to 3 applications, and you can collaborate in up to 5 in total. Each application invited to attend the workshop, whether that's from a single applicant or already as part of a consortium, can send 2 people to the event. I must state for this Discovery Workshop, no grant funding is available in phase 1. In terms of attending the workshop, you will not be paid for attending the workshop itself, nor will you be paid for the development of your proposal. As part of attending the workshop, Innovate UK will pay your residential and subsistence cost during the Discovery workshop itself. This will exclude alcohol. You will have to pay, you'll have to pay your own travel costs to and from the event, and grant funding for projects will be available for subsequent phases, and then we'll ask you to apply with a more detailed project proposal. I must reiterate, you can apply for future phases of this programme, even if you do not attend the Discovery workshop. As I said, it's inclusive, and you can apply to phase 2 or phase 3 competitions, even if you didn't attend or are involved in phase 1. In terms of state aid, please be aware that all UK businesses claiming funding in Future Flight and phases of this programme subsequently must be eligible to receive state aid at the time we confirm your award of the funding. If you're unsure whether you're eligible, please take legal advice on this, and there is further information on eligibility through our general guidance on the Innovate UK website. Just to state projects that we will not fund, we are not looking for projects that only focus on aircraft technology development, such as ones with consortium made up entirely of aerospace manufacturers, and we are not looking to fund defence or space applications or autonomous and/or electric flight. Just some key dates to leave you with. The competition opened on the 30th of September. The competition closes for phase 1 on the 13th of November at 12 p.m. I'd urge you, and my colleagues will in their presentations, do not leave your submission of your application until that 12 o'clock deadline. It gets very, very busy. Please submit early. Notifications of successful attendees at the workshop will be on the 16th of December, and the workshop itself will be on the 4th and 5th of February. Again, reiterate, please note that close date. It definitely is 12 p.m. on the 13th of November. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John. So I will quickly introduce the scope of the competition, and then I'll hand over to Izzy, who will then explain the mechanism of how to apply on IFS. So the scope of this competition is for all UK-based organisations that can address one or more of the 6 problem statements that Gary have highlighted earlier. Just to reiterate the 6 problem statements here. So at this phase, there's no funding for grant funding, but in the workshop that we will provide accommodation and food, excluding alcohol, we must say. And you have to obviously pay your own way to get there. And then I'll hand over to Izzy, which will then introduce the 7 questions we'll be asking.
Thank you. So these are the questions that you're going to be asked on IFS. There are no appendices attached to these ones, so we'll go through them now a little bit more briefly. So the first question is your response to the challenge. Please tell us how you plan to respond to that challenge. And this is a screenshot of what it is you will see on IFS. So as you can see, there is guidance on every question and including a word limit. So question 2 is the markets, benefits and impact. So we're asking you to describe what it is of those that you hope to deliver. This one's got a slightly reduced word limit to the last one. Question 3 is the cost and duration. So how much will it cost and how long will it take to deliver what you've outlined in your response? As you can see from the low word limits, it's not hugely detailed. We're not after masses of information, and we're also not after in-depth finances. It's just outlining how much you think it will cost, how long it will take to deliver, and what it is, how you would relate this to the expected costs that if you were to apply it in phases 2 and 3, which would be far more in detail. Question 4 is the expertise and interests. So here we're asking you to give us an overview of each organisation's main activities. Question 5 is a collaboration. So if you're already collaborating or are hoping to collaborate with others, which of the 6 problem statements would you like to work on and why? Question 6 is benefits to you and your organisation. So what is it that you hope to gain from taking part in the Discovery Workshop? And question 7 is the Discovery Workshop. So we're asking you to explain how you are suitable for the workshop. Please note that all these questions are completely directed towards the workshop and not the later 2 phases. So again, submitting your application, as John said, it gets very, very busy towards the 12 o'clock deadline. And IFS will automatically close at midday. So please don't leave it to 11:59 and hope that you can slide on in, because it probably won't work. If you have any issues though, or coming up to that 12 o'clock deadline, do please get in contact with our support staff. They're more than happy to help. And if you have a technical issue because of the high traffic, we can then hopefully pull your application through and make it work for everybody. So IFS will tell you if you have completed all of the questions, and if not, everything must be marked as complete with a nice big green tick. And if it's not, you won't be able to submit. And if you don't agree to our terms and conditions, you also won't be able to submit. If you have any issues with this, again, any technical issues, do please get in contact with us and we will do everything we can to help you through. So, as you can see, we see, well, you can't see at all. We see a lot of applicants who complete the application but don't complete the final steps. So please do make sure that you click the submit applications. Up until this point, you can go back and edit anything, even if you've marked it as complete. But the moment you've submitted, you won't be able to go back again. So that's it. Once it's done, then the lead of the consortium will receive an email confirming this. This will then be what you see on your IFS dashboard. IFS is very easy. It'll help you, guide you through step by step. So even if you are new to the system, it's not a hard one to get your head around. And this is what your dashboard will look like. So if you are awaiting assessment, it'll tell you. If you've moved forward, it'll tell you. If you have any messages, it'll tell you. So for the assessment of these applications, your application is to be assessed by 5 independent assessors. We advise that you follow the guidance notes. We are looking for quality, not quantity, and the right amount of information. So the key dates are that the notifications will be sent out to you on the 16th of December, and the feedback will follow. Again, all the information will be released to you through IFS. We have a Q&A slide, but we also have a Q&A session, so I think we're going to move over onto the rest and then do the questions later on. Is that correct? You want to do the questions now?
Isobel? Okay. Well, thank you very much. We're just going to do a bit of jiggling around and invite Ruth Malazray onto the stage for the Q&A session, who is the stakeholder engagement lead for Future Flight. So this is an opportunity for you now to quiz the panel if you've got any burning questions, and we'll also accept questions online as well. So we'll just be mindful that we have that as well. So who'd like to go first? And if you wouldn't mind just waiting for the microphone, please, so that everybody can hear the question. That'd be great. Thank you.
Thanks. Obviously, there's benefits in being involved in phase 1, I know that. But if you weren't successful in getting into phase 1, the discovery stage, or if indeed you didn't apply, but you had an idea later for phase 2, would you be precluded from entering that, or would you be able to apply to phase 2 later on?
Yeah, I'll take that. John could answer very knowledgeably as well. One of the central, if I come back and give context, one of the central things we're really clear on, that this is developing not just one but potentially several new sets of markets, and as we've said, involving a wide range of technologies. So one thing we know for sure is that we don't fully understand the landscape of that. So part of the reason the challenge is set up the way it is to anticipate that we will discover, even if we have lots of really good participants in the first phases, we will discover things that we hadn't understood are required to come in. So we want the flexibility for ourselves, for that reason, to encourage people to come in later. The same is true of participants. Knowing many of the organisations in the room, there are several ways in which you could choose to engage in this. So you might decide to engage one way at phase 1 and then develop. So we quite like the flexibility that, because the wider ecosystem is still developing, that you also have flexibility. So it's set up to absolutely allow that freedom, that people can come into the later stage, and we will not judge you against your earlier stage entry. We want the flexibility.
Great, thank you.
Any more questions?
Thank you, everybody. Said from Samad Aerospace. Is there any way that in this program could be accelerated to be implemented faster. Because if you remember, this industrial strategy program started April last year, where the number of competitions globally was about 40 companies in this new sector. Now we're talking about 180 companies. And by the time that this program comes alive, sometimes October next year, then we will have more people coming in. So how can we make sure that we can get into the actual work? Because originally we were planning to start from April this year. And so as one of the companies that we formed consortiums, we prepared all of our consortiums, we talked to various stakeholders, and we geared up to start from April, but now this is like 18 months late. How can we help you to, as stakeholders within the industry and academia, to accelerate this program? Because it seems very long to us.
So if I can, I'll take that one. I mean, that is a good question. We know this has been around us for a while, and its development has taken a certain amount of time to get to this point. So I think it depends what people are able to do, is the honest answer. We've laid out a programme with phases of discovery, development, and ultimately demonstration towards the end. Now, because we shared timescales of that, and John did that, I don't want to set people's mind that we expect no demonstration before the end of 23-24. That's a presumption of where people may end up for certain classes of vehicles. I know several organisations that their thinking is they would like to do something which is looking like quite near completion of a substantial project, probably more like 21 to 22. So I think that's a possibility for us. We have a presumption of where the funding goes. We have to do, financial planning. We have a presumption of planning assumption, but I think there's freedom to consider in there. So I think it very much comes down to how well formed, how well developed and thought through the consortia are and their ability to start. We can't accelerate this first phase. We've had a lot of debate around this. This first phase up to the workshops, that's set in stone. From stage 2, I think we do have quite a lot of freedom about how fast you wish to go forward on the projects. I'll just invite, because it's quite an important question, I'll invite any other comments from my fellow panellists.
No, I think that's right, Gary. It depends on individuals and consortia what stage they are in their development. But Gary's right. We've got this fixed time for phase 1, but then, as we've said earlier, flexibility for future stages, which we'll look at. But we need to get ourselves into the workshop and out the workshop environment to get a better idea and the picture of where we currently are with those certain individual consortia.
Yeah, I mean, certainly if somebody were to come by, Syed, and say, we've got something, we could do the whole thing by, mid-2022, we certainly won't be conditioning that that's too fast for the programme. We'll want to try and enable that. And I recognise it's a very good question, and it's an area that we need to help with.
Just behind you, Natasha. Thank you.
Thank you. Jonathan Cooper, University of Bristol. Can you tell us a bit more about these discovery workshops? Because it seems a little bit strange where we're all going to be in consortia putting our best bid in, and it sounds like we're going to have a workshop and tell everybody else what we're going to do. Perhaps I'm being just a bit worried.
Yeah, we're not asking you to give away your crown jewels at the workshop. What we're looking at with that as an activity is to explore, as we have stated, the breadth of new people will come together, key stakeholders that we're envisaging. We're using it as an opportunity to come together and actually look and learn where we might strengthen our current offerings and collaborations and build new collaborations that deliver against the problem statements we've articulated. So very much about getting in and looking at broadening and diversifying who we're currently talking to.
So, and I'll just add to that if I can. I think Future Flight is, as it's been talked about in the briefings so far, either today or in previous events, is very broad, and it's about enabling a lot of people to go forward and go to a commercial environment. So it's trying to address needs for the plentiful. So one of the things that the workshop will seek to address is that we might find that there are 3 or 4 consortia that come forward are trying to address something very comparable. So would there be an opportunity for that to come together in an even bigger consortia? So it's that kind of thing. And I think the important thing as well is that workshop will, without giving away crown jewels or lots of secrets, you are actually often able to say, I'm a airport and I need to be able to understand certain things to be able to operate these vertical takeoff and landing things, and these are some of the things I need to be able to understand. you aren't necessarily giving anything away about your market intention, your route to commercial operation of those things, but you are saying these are some of the things that we would have to address. So it's that kind of balance. I hope that's helpful.
And one other thing I could add to that, I did expect we'd all speak, 'cause it's a good question, is when we come to phase 2 and phase 3, as Izzy said, they will be subject to a new, somewhat more rigorous application process. That's how we choose people for phase 2 and 3. We're not prejudging in the workshops that we like this idea or not. You will still have to apply. So the workshops are, honestly, for people will get different things from them. I do know there are people who are already in well-formed consortia, which from the outside look pretty conclusive, pretty robust, pretty well thought through. We know other people are not. We meet people who are just entering into this space, think they've got an awful lot to add, but are not classically engaged in aviation or aerospace, therefore need some time to connect. So for us, the workshop is, for some people, it's actually starting from a relatively low base to help them build consortia in that time period. So there's lots of things we try to do in the workshop, but I guess what I'm saying is if you already know exactly what you want to do in a well-formed consortia, we're not looking for full disclosure during those workshops. You'll be quite well-formed, and we will not judge people that you are successful in phase 2 based on what you disclose in the workshop. That will follow the formal process.
Thank you.
Lisa Davids from Attentus. Clearly there's going to be a constraint on the amount of people that are going to be able to be present at the workshop. And for us to understand, is it possible to know how many people are here today, how many people get access to the recording, so that people can work together in being able to either have sort of representation there or for the information to be disseminated? Or are you going to be pretty comprehensive about that dissemination of the information, even if you weren't actually present at the workshop?
Please, John.
Yeah. So as I said, in terms of the phase 1, those that will be there, for each applicant invited, we expect to have 2 people represent at that event. Very much from the output from the event, we hope, as well as it being networking and sort of looking at who potentially might explore ways of working together, we would always look to sort of get some of the main outputs together if we discover through that certain new emerging themes, or based on the problem statements, there's certain emphasis that we think we need to be on. And again, in fairness to all applicants in subsequent phases, if we're using any information that comes out of the workshop to enhance the scope of subsequent competitions, then we would publish that as part of the criteria for subsequent phases, so that nobody coming into subsequent phases would be disadvantaged from not having attended the first workshop.
I think the other thing was a question about numbers. I'm not sure, I don't know why we can't disclose the numbers, but obviously we're very cautious about, unless people give us positive identification about disclosing email contacts and so on. It's interesting as this challenge evolves, and my experience is quite new to these challenges. I don't think you have any idea the kind of numbers you get until you get started. From what we've done so far, we've done a few events, we've had quite a lot of interest offline with all of the challenge team, having lots of conversations. And looking at the kind of numbers that have signed up for this in the room and online and with our subsequent networking events, I think we're operating at around about 200 to 300 people expressing some live interest in this right now. Now, whether that becomes 50 when people have heard and they want to narrow down, or whether there are multiple people in the same organisation, but it is a substantial number, that's fair.
But within that 200 people, so the group that here and the people online, looking at 200 plus people, there are consortia. And so, it's representation of that consortia that come to the event. So, I think the numbers will be interesting, but I think it'll be very manageable to represent the programmes that get selected to go through.
Thank you.
Mike Bromfield, Coventry University Institute of Future Transport and Cities. Just a quick question on the workshops. Who will facilitate the workshops?
So I'll take the challenge team. Clearly, it's our accountability to ensure the workshops are facilitated, which is a slightly oblique reference. We will need to put together a team to facilitate them. I mean, we're under no illusion that it is not a loose workshop. It is not many people talking and hoping things form. It will be structured, organised, and require quite a bit of forethought. And we will reach out to other people to help us facilitate that stuff. But we will orchestrate the challenge team within UKRI, the workshops themselves.
We'll be working with the KTN to support that. The KTN are well versed in facilitating quite complex, events of networking and brokering consortia, etc. So they're our partner on these sorts of things.
Yeah, and fair to say, we know from the contact we've had in the last few months, there are organisations who would be very helpful to us in doing that facilitation. So I would expect us to use a range of partners. Clearly, we've always got that challenge that the people helping do the facilitation, have to be completely neutral. They have to help us create this thing properly.
Yeah. So there's someone. Thank you.
Hi, David Stanleyford from Xenotech. It's clearly a very exciting programme of work. I was looking through the impressive breadth of attendees at this meeting. I suppose if I'm thinking about the big aero companies in the UK who are publicly engaged in at least some programmes involved with future flight, I don't see anyone here. Is there a relationship between this programme and what is known to be some of the programmes that the big aero companies are doing already?
I'll take that one, David. So there's quite a lot to that question. So I would say some of the big aero companies are here. It probably depends what you mean by a big aero company, because I'm staring at some of them. So there are people in that space in there. We have, we'll clearly give nothing away. You'd imagine we've had a conversation with a wide range of people, including big aerospace companies, who will work out how to participate in this. Ultimately, we don't know who will bid, whether they will or they won't. My expectation is that some will do. There seems to be some interest in that. The nature of how classic big aerospace companies engage, very much up to them, because if you think back to this programme, it's one of the things I love about it. It's everything from drones and the safety case of drones and beyond visual line of sight to urban air mobility, possibly autonomous urban air mobility. Those things look nothing like what a classic aerospace company is into, but then we foresee there are paths of that technology through into sub-regional and large aircraft, which goes right into aerospace. So if you are today one of these very large aerospace companies, and I'm simplifying this way more than is really appropriate, you could engage because you wish to come and explore these new classes of vehicles, because you wish to understand how the technology will develop and flow, but really your place is your classic market. You could engage because you find this itself a really interesting adjacent market and you wish to move there. I suspect, and I don't know, that all of the large aerospace players have got that going through their brains, what's the right way to engage in this, and we'll see how that plays out.
So just to add as well, though, so I think you might be referencing the ATI programme and how, so we're in regular dialogue with the Aerospace Technology Institute because we are having conversations and we're redirecting people. So we flag who we're redirecting and vice versa. And the potential connectivity of current ATI projects that are on the books, potentially coming to conclusion, are they potential consortia that could come forwards? So there is a very, good, healthy dialogue between the two programmes, and there needs to be, because, people will get confused as to where do I take my checkbook? Do I go to Future Flight or do I go to ATI? We're really clear, so if you come to us, we'll let you know, come to us or go to ATI. But it's a good relationship, good connection.
And if I can, Ruth, if I can just add to that, I mean, it's a good problem to have because ATI exists, been around for a while. Future Flight is coming to creation. It's a different structure. It's an Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund. And a few times people have said, it's a little confusing. We've got various bits of government we could go to. How do we engage? I think you have to look at this and say it's a wonderful problem to have that this country now is investing in substantial money in classic aerospace technologies and also wishes to invest in the wider infrastructure and aviation systems that some of those technologies could flow into. So yeah, we'll have to help you manage that, and there's a really good relationship, as Ruth said, but we have to look at it positively and go, the UK government's got 2 significant investment opportunities in this space. That's a really good thing.
There's a question at the back there. Oh, to the right, I think. Oh, okay. Sorry.
Thanks, Michelle. Kate Chandler from Synthesis. You very clearly identified that space wouldn't be part of this programme. I'd be quite keen to know how you plan to integrate increased space development for future evolutionary processes rather than complicate them in 10 or 20 years' time.
That's a bit technical for me.
So let me have a go, and if I've misunderstood the spirit of the question, please correct me. So space technologies, in a broad sense, could potentially participate in future flight in the comms and control systems, and we've had conversations around that already, so there will be some play across in there. I think what we're intending to say is that this is not a space vehicles programme. It's not developing into electrification of space and those things. There's clearly a relationship between the two. So
sorry for not making it clear. So to validate, obviously, spaceports, integration, flexible use of airspace, application of that flexible use of airspace, access to that airspace, all of those will have implications upon this programme.
Yeah, thank you. And you were clear first time. I didn't understand that take on it. Yes, I think that's a fair question, and we'd have to reach out to those agencies. I mean, a part of what we do, because we have a very clear relationship with Civil Aviation Authority, and when we talk to them, and air traffic providers as well, when we talk to them, they understand that they butt up against other regulators and people who manage the wider space definition as well. So yes, we'll have to do that. There is no answer about how we do that right now. It's a useful reminder.
There are some good conversations already emerging with the Satellite Applications Catapult, which isn't necessarily about flight and space launch, so that's good. And when we look at all of the grand challenges from the UKRI's Industry Strategy Challenge Fund pot, need to consider how they engage more broadly, not just with industry, but also across government and the space agencies on our, target agency to consider discussions with. And then the final part is the dialogue that we're having with aspects of NATS who are sort of operating airspace. So it's a great question, and there's a lot of dialogue going on around that aspect.
Hi, good morning. Just a question on the applications process. If we find ourselves interested in a number of potential challenges and potential areas that are quite disparate from one another, does that go in as multiple applications, or do those all have to be covered within a single application?
So the rules we put around this one, you can be a lead partner for up to 3 applications, and you can collaborate in another 5, and that's the limit of the rule. We haven't specified, they could be disparate things, because we understand companies do and are involved in a wide range of activities.
So it could be in 8 applications, or in 5 where they lead 3.
They could, well, we've left it open. They could lead 3, and you could be involved in another 5, so this is 8 in total.
Okay.
And maybe I can give you what I think is a very practical answer as well. For this stage of the competition, the word limit looks pretty challenging to me. So I think the idea that companies would have many different places they could interface into this programme and describe them all in that word limit, I think is impractical. So yeah, I would encourage you to do different separate applications. Let's judge the merits of those rather than try to unpick all the things that you might do in a single application.
Okay, we have another one towards the front.
Amir Rabbani from Digital Catapult. Probably is a bundle of questions. One is, you mentioned phase 1 is open to all organizations. Is it open to RTOs as well to apply? Then is there a match fund? What is the match funding requirements for each project? And if a submission in the first phase is unsuccessful, in the second phase, if the consortium submit an application, is it a resubmission or is it a new submission?
So can I take those in reverse order? I'm going to defer to my colleagues on the first one, certainly about the match funding and RTOs. RTOs we expect to take part in this. But if you have I get the question right for the last part of it, if you're unsuccessful in a first stage of application, there's nothing to stop you submitting again in the second stage of application, either because you've changed your mind about what you want to do, our rules have moved on and developed, so there's nothing to stop you. It's not a one-shot thing. My encouragement would be, despite having said that we've deliberately crafted this so people can come in at later stages without having taken part in the first stage. Everyone I meet, I say, I think it would be sensible to try to take part in the first stage, because if you are successful at the workshops, that will give you some learning and engagement with the wider community. But if you do get that far, you're successful, come to the workshops, then it will still be an open competition for phase 2. If you're unsuccessful coming to the workshops, you're not precluded from bidding for stage 2. I think there were 2 other parts of the question. I think John and Izzy are probably better placed to answer.
Sorry, can you repeat the question? I got lost on the third.
I think the question was if RTOs also can lead an application in the first phase?
No, it's just down to business-led.
Okay, and the match funding, if there is any match funding?
There is no funding for phase 1.
It's just phase 2 and 3.
In subsequent phases, that will become part of the scope and criteria that we'll announce going forward.
Okay, so at this stage, there is not, for example, like for other ISCF programs, there is a total match funding for each project. So it doesn't matter if you are a SME or whatever, like the project has to be 50% match funded.
Sorry, John, please go ahead.
No, I'm going to say for Future Flight Phase 1, there is no grant funding. We've been through that. The subsequent phases 2 and 3, we will make that known through the scope and criteria for future competitions when we reach stage 2 and stage 3.
Yeah, for the avoidance of doubt, there is absolutely funding in stage 2 and 3. We'd find it difficult to have an audience if there was none at all. So there is. It's just this first formative stage. So the rules of that and how it comes out, the percentages, that will be published at the time. Not
indeed.
Okay. Sorry, taking long, but in the competition that is open now, it says there will be projects will be funded 5 to 10 million in the development stage. Is it for the development stage, or is it for a demonstration, or is it for all? I don't know. It's not very clear.
No, it talks about subsequent stages, phase 2 and phase 3. It's to give an indicative idea of what is coming after stage 1.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. And it talks about the total amount of funding available.
I will say, and the question might come up, it may be clear, the programme, we're trying to go as fast as we can, so we go quite quickly from those workshops into phase 2, so it won't be far, that time will fly by, it will not be that far away that we give the detailed rules of competition 2, it comes soon after the workshops.
Thanks. Steve Herford from Kinetic, very interesting programme. Could you elaborate a bit more on the pricing question that you asked in the first round of applications? I'm trying to align that to the solutioneering, if you like, for the workshop, if that makes sense.
So that question on finances, as I said, it's not a hugely in-depth one. There is a very small word limit in comparison to our bigger competitions. It's more of a, can you give us an idea on how much it is you're planning on spending with your idea that you're going to take to the discovery workshop in the next couple of phases? So we have an idea of what it is you'd be looking at, but not an in-depth, detailed financial breakdown.
I mean, just an observation, I think a lot of people are going to be in exploratory phase themselves and not done a huge amount of solutioneering. So until you've gone through conversations and dialogue with potential partners, it could be quite difficult to give an indication of aspiration for what you'd be looking for phase 2 and phase 3. Just a comment.
I'll give you a view, and Izzy, please add to this. It is not straightforward, I would suggest, because we have to have a set of questions, because we cannot take anybody who wishes to apply to the workshops. We just can't do that. So that dictates there has to be some process, some completely principle-bound, transparent process we follow, which is why the questions are here. So we did wrestle with this about what's the right volume of questions to ask, given that really you're almost saying, can you prove to us you've got some really good ideas, you're up for this, you're financially solvent, and you're prepared to work with other people. So we wrestled with that a little bit. I mean, I would come back to Izzy's answer. We are looking for an answer in there, but it's probably more indicative rather than I've got no idea. Orders of magnitude may be helpful in that one, but we did wrestle with this. We need to ask enough questions to narrow down and get the right set of people in the room, but with not too much prescription, because you're dead right, we're in discovery and solutioneering mode.
Okay, there's a gentleman at the front there. Thanks, Natasha.
Thank you. Will Searle from Actilium Research. A process question. So there are already consortia building up around this activity. I'm aware of a few. I think in the EOI phase, so in the next 6 weeks so, if we were to approach with a consortia that was reasonably well formed, to Gary's point, that understood where it wanted to go, understood what it needed to do into subsequent phases, would that be one EOI on behalf of the consortia, or would it be all in each of the individuals?
Well, I think it could be either is the answer. But my view is I'm quite simple, Will, is if there's a well-formed consortia, bid as a consortia, because that's the basis on which you wish to be considered. We're happy to consider you on that basis.
Brilliant, thank you.
Jonathan Cooper, University of Bristol. If I come back to the funding again, so you're asking us to say this a piece of work will cost £10 million. and then we worry about how much we actually get from UK R&I afterwards.
Yeah.
Because the first question the university is going to ask me is, well, what's the funding scheme?
Yeah, we're going the other way. We want to know how much it's going to cost, and then we'll work out the funding scheme. But I agree that, as we said before, we're looking for indicative costs at this stage for the workshop so that we can understand that going into subsequent phase 2 and phase 3.
And again, the thing is, you're committing yourself as far as coming to a workshop, and I guess I would hope that most organisations, I'm sure it's not all, are happy to take that risk, come join a workshop. We're not asking you to commit to anything beyond that.
Okay, and if I may ask another quick second question. We've talked about 6 challenges, 6 problem statements, but Gary, in your presentation, you said there may be more. Really, others will be included. Are they or aren't they?
The problem statements.
Yes.
Yeah, and again, this is rather like the question before. When you've got a very open challenge that you say the field in front of us is very broad, we have to run a process. You know, we cannot have a competition that says we'll take any ideas of anything to do with the future of flight, come and pile in there. And we've wrestled with this. I've wrestled with this in the time I've been here. So what we've settled on is those 6 problem statements as being good proxies for the wide range of types of problems there are in this space of new categories of flight. And therefore, we publicised those and said, how to explain this, if you look at those 6 problems and statements and say, they've given me enough to know where your head is in the types of things you would like to fund, but I think you've asked the wrong problem statement, there's something really missing in here. We would want you to try and point at a problem statement in the 6 that makes some sense to answer against, but if you come back and say, this is what you really should have done, we're trying to give ourselves that freedom, if that makes sense. And it's been a real challenge for us, that. So yeah, try to address one of the 6 problem statements, but if you wish to argue that there is something else that's really cardinal in here, absolutely we're trying to take that input. It's really quite important. Honestly, we wrestle with this because I think we could have come up with 20 problem statements. They still wouldn't have been right, and lots of the stakeholders would have a different view about the priority of them. So they're meant to frame the broad canvas on which you wish to paint future flight, if you like.
Hi, James Sharp, the University of Birmingham. So, phase 1, business-led discovery workshops. And you said before that it wasn't open to RTOs. Can academics...
Sorry, I'm going to correct that. It is open to RTOs and academics, right, but the consortia has to be led by an industrialist. So it's completely open as consortia members, but when you submit, it has to be led by an industrialist.
Great,
it's
thank
quite
you.
different.
Yeah, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Maybe it's just worth for anybody who wishes to go back, have a look at Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund, what it's all about, and this is slightly different to things we might have done 3 to 4 years ago. It's a developing field, and some of the presumptions about the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund are, it is clearly, by the name, about the UK's industrial strategy. A focus tends to be on opportunities for quite radical, quite game-changing industrial things, for which there's not a near term, but there's a foreseeable route to market. So it is the language around Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund is research and innovation that's got quite clear routes to market where the UK could play a part, hence why it tends to be industrial led. But there is clearly, we've been quite clear on this, there are going to be some really deep technology problems, thorny, knotty technical problems buried in here that some of the smaller, possibly larger RTOs and academics will be the right people to solve on behalf of a consortium. It's just a premise of ISCF.
Okay, thank you.
Ian Pugh, Synthesis. Problem statement number 3, it talks about no clear technology, regulatory or operational paths. And then it goes on to say there's a need to develop technologies. What about the other bits then? Where do you see the regulatory information coming from?
I'm sort of glad you asked that, only because it's one we did a lot of thinking about. We can give a good answer. It probably doesn't come out in that question, but that I would say, let me answer an extended question, I guess. There are a couple of elements in here which are going to be absolute enablers for future flight. They just have to be solved, but they're not technology per se. One is that you can create a regulation environment which is sensible, potentially is scalable, can work with other countries, preserve safety. We're dealing with that by a very close relationship with CAA. CAA sit on kind of all of our governance boards on the working team, and we have an increasingly well-developed relationship with CAA as our agent into other overseas bodies. So the regulation is part of it. So we absolutely expect there to be regulatory development, and if you look in the CAA's current setup, they have an innovation hub which is there developing innovative thinking around regulation. So that's quite an important part of it, absolutely key. The other point, and again, I appreciate you didn't ask this, but the other big enabler for us is this public acceptance question. Are people ready for these markets to develop? So if you look at some of the consultancy reports in this area, there are people who believe that the technology could be developed and the general public just does not wish to access it, it gets killed off. So we think there are several things which are not purely about the technology that we need to encourage the development and thinking in to allow the thing to move forward. So regulation, absolutely.
So would that include system of system engineering thinking and that sort of work be within scope?
Yeah, and I think you're kind of asking some of the really good questions here. Some forums we talk quite a lot about that, others less so, because people who are into system of systems and system architecting and systems engineering quite enjoy the conversation. It can lose some other people. But that phrase of system of systems, that's run throughout Future Flight since day one, that how those technology systems, how the business operating models, how the public reaction works, how regulation works, to me they're all systems engineering problems, and we have to architect that solution so that the system of systems works. So perhaps we should have emphasised that. I will be unsurprised if some people wish to bid to play at that level. I know of at least 2 organisations had a conversation with me, and that's really where they wish to play, sitting above the top. Either that's doing this is my background, systems architecting of the total enterprise system, safety analysis, safety architecting of that system, or after the event, simulation of the system to prove how the different models come together to show that the system will work. So absolutely that system of system things runs throughout. Maybe we should have brought it out. I'll be unsurprised if some people bid and they wish to operate principally at that level, running across all the other legs.
I would say as well that when we in the work that went on between April and the sort of late summer of last year, bringing all these challenges together, the premise and the argument back into government as to why Future Flight was needed was this systems connectivity, that whilst, aerospace talks to airports and airlines and to airspace in different angles, they tend to be talking in a very sort of in their own agendas or current operations. And yet with the acceleration, the number of startups of these sort of, innovative vehicles, there is absolutely a very strong need to be able to do something, bringing all those different complex stakeholders together and some new players into that to address it in a different way. So it speaks very strongly to a systems approach. For me, a really big Nirvana consortia would have, aerospace and an airline and an airport and airspace management and some ground infrastructure people all in one melee of some description, trying to address slicing through those problem statements. So the system thing is really important.
There's a question at the front there. Thank you, Natasha.
Hi, Ed Bland from Thales. Just building, Gary, on your previous answer, regulation development obviously involved the CAA. It also involves NATS. So do we assume that we have commercial access to those people, or do the consortium need to go off and develop their own relationship?
It could be both, Ed, if I'm really honest. I think it's the complexity here is that NATS is both a public body and a commercial body. To some extent, the CAA is, as I've been learning as well. So it's entirely possible that consortium members will want to engage in 2 directions. One will be through something I think we will host to have a kind of a network-wide conversation about how the regulation's going. You may then have specifics where people wish to somehow bring in, particularly NATS, into that conversation. So I think both of those things could be true. Yeah.
And can I add to that if you are looking for a connection into those organisations and any other organisation, feel free to contact us at KTM. We can link you up. Is there any more questions? I think I saw another hand. Gentleman in the front.
Yeah, just very quickly, is the information you've put up today available online?
Yes. There's some apprehension for an SME because obviously this will require quite a large amount of effort and an expense from our part. Historically, we've been under the impression that the larger organisations, whether that's Airbus, Boeing,
Rolls-Royce, whatever, would receive preferential treatment. Is this geared, or is there the ability for SMEs to take serious part in this? Because that's where a lot of the invention is coming from.
Yeah, I'll take that one, and John and Ruth might also add, because I know you've both got strong views about this. I mean, absolutely, this is for, I want the people who've got the ideas and the innovation in this programme. This is not, it is going to be, there's going to be some significant step changes in aviation comes out of what we're doing, and the people who bring forward the ideas to that, they could absolutely be completely well-established aviation or aerospace players. I would say that when you get those step changes, often people who hadn't seen coming are the people who solve the problem. So we're going out of our way to reach out to those people as broadly as we can, including the difficult one of reaching out to those people we don't know we need to reach out to. Maybe it's a digital thing, or it's a bit of artificial intelligence that actually lets these vehicles fly. To the question, is there any preferential I'll put my spin on it. Do we have a preferential view of any types of organisations? No, we absolutely don't. Do I imagine that will be big companies playing in this field? Yes, I do, but to be decided. There's no expectation that that's where the bulk of funds goes, not at all. And if anything, that's one of the things that, to me, differentiates Future Flight with some other things we've done. It's so broad-ranging, we have to reach out to non-conventional, particularly SME startup and innovators. John, Ruth, I said you might want to add to that as well.
I hear you, actually, and I think it's very challenging. I would say that, as Gary's just said, this is as broad can be. And I think there are organisations out there. I've seen, I've been in the aerospace community for just over 10 years, and I'm hearing company names I've never heard of in data, in software, in simulation, in modelling, all because of Future Flight, and it's a breath of fresh air, so I think that's fantastic. I would say that the engagement with some of the more mature players will be of benefit to you because they know how to navigate the regulatory environment, the sort of frameworks that have to be adopted over time because, as I always point out, flying at 20,000 feet, we need to have some mechanism in place to make sure it's all okay. So I can't encourage you enough to, step right in. If you want to talk to players who you think can help you in your business, you either speak to any one of the panel here or the KTN, and we'll do our best endeavours to try and help that connectivity.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I was going to echo what's been said. Part of what we design and look at the workshop is that everybody's coming on equal footing. We're not looking at any hierarchical organisation. It's about coming in and talking with equals.
And if I can, just because it's a really good question, we'll keep going. I get, SMEs, particularly more S than Ms, that this is even applying for stage 1 is non-trivial, and taking 2 days out of the office is non-trivial for some people. But I will remind you that stage 1 is it's a simple set of questions as we can have. And you're coming to attend workshops. It may be that people wish to do that and then have a more considered view on stage 2, where you are going to be committing to kind of monitoring and evaluation and spending funds and so on. I think I'd urge everyone to don't self-select out thinking it's going to be focused on other people or too difficult to engage in at this range. Come and take part in stage 1, which we're trying to make simple, to encourage a wider range of participants than we might otherwise get.
Okay. So Kate, I know you want to ask a question. Can we just check in online and make sure the questions are dealt with? Everything's okay? Okay, great. Okay, over to Kate. Thanks.
Thank you. One final question. You identified that you must be part of a consortia. If you have the ability and the capability as an SME to provide an answer to some of your questions without being part of a consortia, will you be given consideration?
Yes, so I think we've maybe said something we hadn't quite intended to. Our presumption is everything will become by consortia, because our presumption is that it's such a broad range that the example we always use, the type of aircraft you'll fly and the comm system it have clearly are linked to the air traffic management system and the regulation and so on. So our presumption is that there'll be a lot of connections across there, but there is not a hard and fast rule that says we will eventually do all of our funding purely to consortia. I think that's a presumption.
Yeah, can I just add? So for the workshop at phase 1, we're saying it can be individual businesses are coming because they're looking to become part of consortia. our planning assumption, as Gary said, is for subsequent phasing. Given what we've looked at in this challenge, we expect it to be more of a collaborative affair. But we're not saying who you will work with. We're looking at ways to explore who you might want to work with in terms of your business going.
But I think, I'll stress this, it is conceivable, it's not what we imagine, it's conceivable that somebody comes forward and actually they've got such a central piece of this, that technology feeds across everywhere, that there's not any great benefit in forming a consortium. It's just an infrastructural, that's not the right phrase in this case, but a kind of a foundational piece of this. So it's conceivable that we could fund an individual organisation. I think it's going to be not the norm.
Thank you.
There's one more over here, thank you.
Thank you. Question around the type of projects that you mentioned about a drone, an air taxi, or a sort of urban vehicle, and sub-regional. What do you mean by sub-regional? Because you had mentioned all electric. Does that mean there is no hybrid electric is not included? I saw the EFAN X picture on is that the type of project that you want to support, or does that include also the new developers who are doing the city-to-city type?
Yeah, so that's one of the reasons why we have that problem of naming the vehicle classes, which we've done to try and frame the types of things. The other thing you find is that people just use different definitions of these things. I tried to wean myself off urban air mobility because it's something that goes from one city 40 miles to another city. Is that urban air mobility or is it intracity? So there's lots of different definitions. We're receptive to anything broadly in this space, and certainly that question of what we mean by sub-regional, we're talking about, again, it's terminology, we're thinking about smaller regional aircraft, and if somebody has got something which is hybrid electric and fits in the spirit of future flight, perfectly acceptable. We think we're on a journey to more and all electric, but hybrid electric fitting with the wider realms of future flight is in scope.
Thanks.
I mean, the key thing, I'll keep stressing this, please don't read boundaries in that we hadn't intended, which is quite hard to say. We're trying to keep this open. Hence why there is this workshop phase one and why we call it discovery approach. So when somebody turns up and says, you've missed the key technology and those 3 aircraft are not the ones you should be doing, and we sit and go, yes, that's a really good thought, yes. We're trying to keep it quite open in that sense.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And it's got one at the front as well.
Hi, Furkan from GKN Aerospace. For any of the consortia looking at physical flight testing, flight demonstrations, do you see a shared set of platforms and vehicles, or do you see each consortia almost bringing in their own vehicle or set of vehicles?
I would say I'm quite open-minded on that. Is it conceivable that, it depends, I guess. Is it conceivable that a consortium could take a vehicle and the vehicle itself has no further technology to be developed, it's just available, and you wish to put all the effort into flying it, and 2 consortia wish to have different use cases, different parts of the country, different technical solutions of airspace integration? Yeah, it could be the same vehicle. I think we're pretty open-minded about that.
Okay, thank you.
There you go. Oh, got one more.
Future flight as a system, do you consider it as a parallel to the conventional aviation system, or do you look at it as an integrated system? And if you look at it as an integrated system, would you consider shortfalls in the current conventional aviation system as applications?
Yeah, my personal view, I think it is more likely to be accepted and make sense if ultimately it's integrated, but that makes it a more technically difficult challenge, because clearly there's lots of ways this could go. If you look at urban air mobility, a market could develop there of people who would never fly by any other means at all, and therefore in that sense that's a completely new self-contained system. It is quite likely that these new classes of aircraft will want to do kind of interlining, interconnection with other types of aircraft. So I think eventually we'll have to have some kind of integrated system. You've then got the airspace problem itself, where I don't think we'll want to have completely integrated, kind of separated airspace for these classes of vehicles. It's too hard to do so. So my personal view is it will become quite integrated in the system, and therefore we'll keep having conversations with existing aviation systems and aviation providers, and that we'll see a continuum there.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any more questions? If not, we can draw the session to a close? No? Okay. Well, thank you very much. That was very insightful. Thank you for your questions. If you'd just like to join me in thanking our panel, first of all, thank you. So we'll just say goodbye to our online viewers, and then we will head into lunch, which will be available for you in water.